Donnie and Dolly. The team is supported by ableauctions.ca. Closing your business? We can help.
Wednesday, and all of our guests today brought to you by our title sponsor, Jeremy Dodd and Company, Able Auctions, ableauctions.ca. As we told you earlier, the BC Lions, as expected, have let go after 5 years of head coach and co-general manager Rick Campbell. And here to talk about it, the man who broke the story from TSN, Farhan Lalji. Farhan, thanks for doing this, sir. How are you?
I'm good. You sound like crap, though. What's going on with your voice?
Oh. Well, it's been like this for 3 days, and then like other people in this room, I fight through it, and I'm still showing up for work.
You play hurts, and of course we know Rick broke the story because Rick breaks it all.
Hey,
right, Rick?
I didn't take a day off last year. Not one sick day. Not one sick day.
Understandable move, Farhan?
Yeah, it is, right? I mean, there's the consumer confidence element of it. There is the did he lose the room element of it. Has it gotten stale? All of that. And when I look back on this, I do look back, and Rick, well, it's because you like Winnipeg. The Mike O'Shea situation way back before they finally turned the corner. And what's the right time, to do something like this? But, it feels like consumer confidence was also a big part of this decision. And, they wanted to make bigger decisions in terms of their football ops piece, who had roster control, all of that. And I think at that point, you also want some alignment. So a number of different things led to the decision. But I get it. I've never been one that's, actively suggested they need to make a coaching change, but I get why they felt the need to do this.
How much did the decision regarding the quarterback situation have to do with this, Farhan? You mentioned losing the room.
Yeah, I think that had a lot to do with it, right? In hindsight, and I've always maintained this. It's so easy because at the front end of all of this, I understood why they were doing it, right? And certainly bringing Nathan Rourke is a no-brainer. Bringing him back was a no-brainer given the circumstances at that time and what you were making your decisions, the information that led to that. But, could he have handled the Vernon Adams piece better in terms of, hey, once you get healthy, you're going to get an opportunity to get your job back and all of those things? In hindsight, absolutely. In hindsight, it absolutely affected the room. Like Vernon Adams is as likable a player as there is in the Canadian Football League. And I think going forward, the Lions have a lot to worry about in terms of VA's ability to recruit players off this Lions team. Guys like Justin McInnes and others to potentially follow him wherever he goes. He's got that kind of impact in the room, and I think the coach probably should have read that a little bit better, again, in hindsight.
Well, 9 losses in their last 13 games. No improvement in the second half. Like we were waiting and waiting and waiting for them to turn it around in the second half. They never did. Okay, so who's going to be the new coach of the Lions? Who are some of the candidates?
Well, I think the top candidates are probably going to be Buck Pierce out of Winnipeg and potentially Jordan McSimic, the offensive coordinator here. And I think offense is a priority in terms of hiring the head coach. And I think in most situations, maybe not Edmonton's, but I think in most other situations, that tends to be the priority because there's so many more quality defensive people available that can come in and be D coordinators, that you got to get the offensive side of it taken care of. If you want the right OC, sometimes you've got to make him the head coach. And in the case of both Pierce and McSimic, both have similar resumes in terms of how long they've been OCs, successful track record, generally not, big personalities and no head coaching experience. Then when you look at the defensive side, I think a guy like Mark Killam, who's going to get some interest in Edmonton as well, the former special teams coach in Calgary, who's got a big personality, right? Like the ultimate alpha, but again, hasn't been that guy before. So I think he gets an interview. I think Mark Washington might as well. I know things didn't go well for him in Hamilton, but his overall body of work is good. He's a strong leader of men. And, and I think he's somebody that people in Vancouver have a connection to. So I think he may get a look there as well. So, there's been some conjecture about whether or not Orlando Steinauer wants to get back into coaching. I was told a week ago that he did. I've been told in the last couple of days that maybe he's not in a hurry to do that right away. And he's in a pretty comfortable position in Hamilton. So that might not change. But, those are kind of the names. So, if you're the Lions, you may go from a guy that's got a head coaching background to a guy that doesn't, and will have to deal with, the newness that comes with that.
All right, other changes as well. Ryan Rigmaiden, the new GM, and Neil McAvoy, who was the GM, he's going to not drop, but he's going to be the new VP of football operations. I would have to assume Ryan's number one job is to right now is to trade. Well, he's got a ton of free agents, but the Vernon Adams trade. When do you think it's going to be done?
Yeah, I think it'll be done in the next couple of weeks, probably early December. Before they get to that Christmas moratorium. And obviously the first order of business for him is to hire a head coach, and then after that, you're right, it's got to be VA. And with the Neil and Rigmaiden piece, it's important to note Neil really pushed for this. Right, this is not a demotion. It was Neil that went to the president and the owner and said, "Look, we can't let Ryan Rigmaiden get out of the building." Because when you have a top-notch personnel guy, you do everything you can to get them because they're the most important person in the organization. And while Neil does a lot of good things with the cap and just overall, management, and he and Coach Campbell had the co-GM titles, right? But ultimately, it was kind of Rick Campbell that had roster control. Now that will go to Rigmaiden. But for anybody that thinks that Neil is being shelved in all of this, to me, I think it shows what a good soldier this guy is in terms of how loyal he is to the BC Lions, that he went out and said, look, let's elevate Rigmaiden so that we can keep him in the building and we can do it this way, and I think the organization will be better for it.
And do you expect Rick Campbell to end up in Edmonton where his father had so much success?
Yeah, I think it's a high probability. I think that Rick Campbell and potentially Mark Killam as well are going to be the front runners for that job there, but I just think this entire exercise this offseason in Edmonton has been about getting the band back together. Former Eskimos, people that have ties to that organization and that community. They did it with Chris Morris as the president. They've done it by bringing back Ed Hervey. And then in the case of Rick Campbell, the son of Hugh Campbell, but also a guy that grew up, went to high school in Edmonton and has ties to that community. So, and Mark Killam does too. Mark is from Edmonton, but Rick also brings that name of being Hugh Campbell's son, and they want to bring it back to that past. And I think that would play well in that city.
Didn't you pick the Bombers to beat the Argos convincingly?
Everybody picked the Bombers to beat the Argos until...
Not in Ontario, they didn't.
Come on. Once the quarterback got injured in Toronto, everybody picked the Bombers to win. But I'm telling you, I to quote Rick Dollywell, I'm telling you, I was actually pretty happy Toronto won. I find the irony in... the only team that consistently wins in Toronto is the one they don't give a damn about. I love that part of it. And, look, it's a good story. Nick Arbuckle, say what you want about him as a quarterback, and I have. He's a good guy. And that story for him, after all that he's been through in the last few years, to be able to have that moment. And look, that's not going to change. Like, Nick Arbuckle is not a starter next year unless Chad Kelly's not ready to begin the season in Toronto. Maybe Nick Arbuckle starts a few games there. He'll be a backup wherever he goes next season. But for him to have that moment after all he's dealt with, I think is a good thing because he's one of the good guys in this league.
Should your people, TSN, CTV, be happy with 3.6 million average viewers on Sunday for the Grey Cup? I think they should.
I think so. Yeah, I think so, especially with the increase in the 25 to 49 or 25 to 54, whatever that prime category is that you and I are all out of now, Donnie. So I think they should be pretty happy with it. And, and it was unfortunate that we went head-to-head with Bills and Chiefs, which was an epic game that drew over 300,000 viewers in Canada, but I think over 31 million in the United States. So that was a tough break. But in terms of when you look at the division finals and the numbers that they drew and what we did here, and in terms of just overall, I think it was around 9.9 million different Canadians, like unique Canadians, watched the game at some point. I think it's a positive.
Buck Pierce, Mark Washington, Jordan McSimic. The name Farhan Lalji wasn't mentioned as a possible new Lions head coach.
Yeah.
Get the cleats back on, or whatever coaches wear these days.
The whistle?
The whistle. There you go.
Yeah.
No?
Yeah, I don't need that stress of being second-guessed by Dollywell.
If you were Lions coach, I would rip the hell out of you every win or lose.
And he'd be like, I remember the days when Rick used to get on the phone and talk to Adam Rita and Greg Mons for hours every morning. People talk about coaches being first in, last out. They had to be first in because to make up for all the time Rick spent with them in order to get their work done. So I can only imagine getting those calls from Rick 20 years later.
Oh, yeah. You'd love it. But just to make it official, you're not a candidate.
Heck no. Here's the one thing.
This is going somewhere, by the way.
No. I know a lot of things, but the thing I know the most is I know what I don't know, and I'm not qualified to be a CFL head coach.
Well, the reason I wanted to make it official, Farhan, because we want to have you on every week.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so we don't want you to get another.
Well, we could do a coach's show if I did get the job, right? Like one of those jobs, I could still be on every week. We could make that part of it. We might need a different sponsor, but we could make it work.
If it happens, you're in coach's show. That's
right.
a promise from you. Thanks for this, Farhan. Short notice. We thank you very much.